skills shortage, the single biggest focus of the federal budget. And even with the unemployment number today at 4.9%, that's still showing the jobs market is quite tight, even despite the loss of jobs for that particular month. So really the question remains, has the government fully grasped the extent of the problem, and will the measures announced in the budget this week be enough to satisfy what we believe is going to be the huge demand for workers in coming years? Well, today I've got a panel of experts with me to discuss that. Simon Boulton, directly next to me, Director from Aequalis Consulting, Peter Gleeson, Executive General Manager Recruitment for Chandler McLeod, and Randstad CEO Fred van der Tang. And Fred, we might just kick off with you because you've got what you call a mobility index, which gives us some sense of the tightness of the labour market already. Tell us about what you found in that.
Yeah, Brooke, the mobility index is actually an indicator of how confident people are about their opportunities in the labour market. It's something that we track every quarter, so we can see how many people are actually looking for new jobs. And we've seen that the Australian mobility index this quarter has hit a high. It's gone up consistently for 4th quarters consecutively now. And actually the Australian job seeker is probably more confident than just about anybody else in the developed world, because this we benchmark against other countries as well. Which
is great for job seekers, not so great for employers trying to keep their staff and also attract new ones if they need to.
Well, exactly. There's plenty of opportunities for job seekers, but the game will be much tighter for the employers.
So, Simon, are you sensing that we're already seeing a pickup in wages with those kind of pressures? If we all feel confident we can walk out and get a job these days, does that translate necessarily yet through to wage pressures? That's our biggest worry.
I think it definitely does, Brooke. I think the demand's high, and it's been at a high level for some time now. The labour shortage is starting to hit as well. So it's a simple supply-demand challenge that I think we're facing at the moment.
And Peter, what are you sensing in terms of how real the problem is now? And in the budget we've been talking about the problems in years to come, but now?
Yeah, I think if we talk initially about the wage, I agree with Simon that there's certainly been an increase, and the bottom line is that so many people have been working on contract as well, and contractors indeed are getting anything up to 40% more than a permanent employee in the same job. So as we try to convert them to permanent, the bottom line is that the wages push upwards. But I think everything's pretty much online. I wouldn't be too concerned about those figures. It was Easter, it was people who were off. As we said, you know, there's a lot of people who are mobile. And, you know, basically it's a reflection of the time of the year, I think.
And all the forward indicators and everything you guys see, I imagine, suggests that we've still got a labour shortage problem and a skills shortage problem to come. Let's quickly get a market reaction before going back to these guys for some more thoughts, and particularly about the longer term issues. Ben Lebrun from CMC Market Stockbroking in Sydney. All right, tell us what you've seen in the minutes after that release then, Ben.
Hi, Brooke. Well, certainly muted reaction from the stock market, although those figures are expected to have a good impact on the stock market moving forward. But certainly the Aussie dollar well and truly dropped out of bed. It dropped a full cent on news of those figures. So just hard to dissect exactly what's happened. Obviously the higher Australian dollar, look at industries like tourism, manufacturing, the retail sector, obviously that must have had an impact, as well as Easter as well. But certainly the Aussie dollar it has fallen quite dramatically, and the pressure would certainly be off the RBA. Especially in terms of wage growth as well, which is what they'll be watching next week.
Thank you so much, Ben. We appreciate that contribution. Thank you.
Okay,
and I should mention to viewers as well, just separate to jobs, unfortunately I have to include this, so India and Australia are set to announce the launch of a free trade agreement or negotiations, and we've actually got the Trade Minister Craig Emerson about to speak. There's the shot from Canberra. We'll perhaps be throwing it up just to remind you it's there, but we'll go back to our guests on the labour market while we await Craig Emerson there, live from Canberra. Let's go back to you, Peter. We just finished off with you. We've had the measures from the government this week. The main ones in the budget were the skilled migration kind of regional program, about 16,000 extra, and also $558 million towards training places.
Yeah.
From what you see and the extent of the problem, is that enough?
Oh, look, I think it's definitely a step in the right direction, and I think the concept of bringing in, I suppose, skilled labour for specific projects is one that's been discussed for some time, and so that creates an immediate, hopeful, reasonably immediate solution to parts of the problem. And upskilling is what we've also been talking about, because the requirements in the marketplace, if there are people in the marketplace, that's one thing, but they've got to have the right skill levels, so reskilling is very important as well.
So, tapping into those extra workers from offshore, how easy is that? I know last month when we had you on, Simon, we were talking about the kind of wages they do require to come to Australia, when they can say it's so much more expensive to, say, live in Sydney or maybe even Perth than New York and London.
That's right. I think that is a shock when people get here, and that's what also I think is fueling that wage growth. People will have higher expenses, wages will go up to allow people to live an affordable lifestyle. So that is a surprise that people are having when they come here from overseas. But I think we need those people coming on board, so I don't think that's necessarily going to make people less likely to come here.
And Fred, where are you seeing employers already looking afield, I guess, to try and tap more workers and a bigger pool of workers?
We already see some examples happening. I can give one example. We work with a company that contracts services to the mining industry. They've been looking for experienced people in coal mines all the way in Poland. So our company have business there as well. We're now in the process of bringing people on 457 visas to work with that company. And that mining contracting company, which is an Australian company, also has set up their own training facility, which so far they've been funding themselves, with the view to qualifying people for the longer term so that they have supply of talent also going forward.
Well, this is one of the issues from the budget, I suppose. We're talking about the need for skilled workers. I mean, to train people up, when you talk of training places, I mean, training takes some time, doesn't it? I mean, that can involve a couple of years as a pipeline.
Well, it does, but you got to start somewhere. I think those initiatives are timely, and I wonder whether they're enough. If you look at the research, we're looking at millions of people that we need extra in the Australian job market in the years to come. So some of these programs will definitely start to yield, but I think the devil will be in the detail.
What are the other measures that Simon, the government needs to look at to bring those people in, get that bigger pool of workers that we know we need?
I think there's a few things. I think firstly it's attracting those people, so making the Australian job market available to people overseas. Secondly, I think it's speed of response. 457 visas being speeded up, I think is a good sign on that front. And then finally, I think it's just it's going to be a need for Australia to be realistic about bringing in employees from overseas. I think there has been a slight tendency to be sort of island Australia, protect the Australian job market, but I think there's going to be a necessity for increased overseas workers to be working here in Australia.
I guess we do want to know if we are exhausting ourselves in tapping all the Australian talent possible. Do you think we are?
I think we're getting close to that. I mean, unemployment figure of 4.9%, we're approaching what we would see as a full employment number. So I think there's certainly difficulty in still attracting local workers.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with Simon. We are definitely not only close to it, I think we're past it. A lot of the employment activity is people shuffling around in jobs into different organisations, attracted by extra salaries and the like. I think the international scene, though, is an interesting one because there's not just a pool of people ready necessarily immediately to come to Australia and be immediately productive. So it goes back beyond that. It goes back getting people job ready offshore with a number of affiliations with both educational and developmental organisations. And I'd be interested to see what the Minister has to say about the Indian initiative because our companies had quite a bit of involvement with that as well, and it's getting people ready when they arrive that they're productive immediately.
In what kinds of ways? What
Well,
do you have to get them ready
if
for?
we take accounting and we take legal, for example, there's a lot of local requirements to get them familiar with local law, whether it be around the Taxation Act or whether it be the accounting standards and practices. So when they get here, there's quite often training needed when they actually get here as well.
And we'll just remind people what you're referring to. The Trade Minister Craig Emerson shortly set to speak in Canberra. We've got the shot for you, I think, to just show you it is about to happen, but set to launch what is a strategically important free trade agreement and negotiations, I should say. We believe that that's coming up in just a short time, so we'll just flag that to you. But negotiations between India and Australia regarding the launch of a free trade agreement. We don't know too many further details. We just know Craig Emerson will be speaking shortly. And also India's Commerce and Industry Minister, I can tell you, Anand Sharma, holding the media briefing with Craig Emerson there. Fred, let's go back to you and the kind of extra ways that employers then, I guess, can try to get more workers. What are you sensing in terms of some of your clients and getting people job ready for when they get here?
Yeah, I agree with the gentleman that the labour market is tight, but there are still untapped groups in the labour market as well. Maturely aged people, for instance, still have a low job participation. There's still many women out there that return from becoming a mother and would like to see job opportunities again. And also youth unemployment in several places is still pretty high, sometimes running into the double digits. So there's no one quick fix. I think organizations and also the government need to look at all the ways possible. So immigration is one of them, vocational training is one of them, but also increasing diversity and tapping into new pools in the labour market is another road.
And we should ask you guys as well about the initiatives to get people out of off the dole and out of long-term unemployment into the workforce. It's great to say we can move those people into the workforce, but employers, what's the appetite for employers on that side of things, just Simon, in the sense that, you know, again, it involves a lot of training and sometimes incentives for businesses to employ those people. Is that right? Or?
Yeah, I think that employers are running out of choices. You know, there isn't that pool of available candidates that we'd normally tap. So these untapped areas, such as perhaps long-term unemployed, mothers returning to work, I think they're going to become much more critical factors in organisations growing their workforce.
So they will naturally want those people. It doesn't have to be a situation where they're sponsored to, or how does that actually work?
I don't think we'll necessarily want them, but they're going to need them. There's going to be a need for those people just simply by the gaps appearing.
Yeah, I think this is where the government's got to take the initiative, though, because the reality is that most employers now are looking for immediate return on investment. So they're not prepared to wait 12 or 18 months for the retraining in order to get people up to speed, if you like, and productive. So it's the return on investment. So the government's going to have to look at that retraining. The reality is, of the 4.9%, at best probably half of those may actually realistically be employable.
And it's the harsh reality, isn't it, Fred?
Well, and like I said before, the devil will be in the details, so it's good to sponsor these initiatives, but it's about how quickly companies can get this return on investment. So if they can get the sponsorship on the incentive quickly, without having to worry about all risks they're taking, that will work better.
And that immediate return on investment means the focus on costs, which again runs against this wage rise environment that we're in. And there's another challenge that organisations still are pursuing, offshoring jobs from Australia to other parts of the world. They save money doing that. It's a big cost saving in terms of headcount costs and things like that. So that's another interesting paradigm, that the world with more jobs going offshore at a time when Australian employers need more people here.
Just from the cost perspective, why now are we seeing more offshore? Just a continuation of a trend, or?
It is a continuation of a trend, but I think revenues are now looking like they're growing, or they're certainly larger than they were, which is not decreasing that interest in cost. It's trying to squeeze more profit from a slightly more bigger revenue figure. So that's where the bottom line management is still very much focused for organisations.
And Peter, just as we have to keep reminding viewers why we've got that box up on the screen, but Craig Emerson to talk about negotiations with India on a free trade. Just can you expand maybe a little bit on what you were talking about earlier? How free trade agreements perhaps play into this kind of discussion we're talking about, workers and labour force? Does it make it easier to facilitate?
I think that the greater the spirit of cooperation between any nations, any groups of employers, even in a local environment, means there's going to be a better chance of success with different initiatives. So if the trade agreement allows a greater, freer flow of trading between the two companies, then clearly that will then develop in terms of human capital as well.
So
I mean, the Indian economy has a huge number of skilled people that are essentially transferable with just a small tweak, if you like, on skill levels in local conditions, etc. So I think there's anything that encourages ongoing interaction and positive economic cooperation, then I think it'll improve it.
Yeah, I fully agree. And we're going to need it too. And
does it
welcome
suddenly
these
open the gates, if you like, when you have those negotiations? Because I mean, obviously you guys are trying to tap into these markets all the time, but is that like I feel that's going to be easier, or is it as easy as that?
It makes it easier. Sorry.
Yeah,
it does actually make it easier, but the reality is the labour market and the broader economic market, in terms of business market, where we've got goods and services being traded, are quite different. And there are initiatives around finding work for people in the local market that probably don't affect the international.
Okay, so Fred, easy but not that easy.
Let's not forget, people that move from one country to another for a job, that's a big step. So, employers, ourselves, we need to make sure that they are right for it, that they're motivated, that they will have some longevity rather than just go for the quick buck and return after a month. So it's not like shipping a container with goods, it's, we're talking people, and it's a different ballgame.
Yeah, this is the thing about mobility, which is maybe where we started the conversation, just bringing it back to the Australian market as well. Incentives for people to move from the East Coast, where their family and all their friends and their lives have been, to go over to the mines in WA, and the pay is there, but do there need to be more incentives, or are your employers finding people want incentives more than just money to move?
I think there is a need for more incentives, and that can be as simple as higher salaries being offered. But that sort of skills creep you're talking about from the East Coast to the West Coast, I think now people with mining experience or with those specific resources skills, they're going to be in WA already. There aren't those sorts of people here on the Eastern Seaboard, because they've already moved across to the other markets in Western Australia. So it's it's still going to be challenging again.
I think historically, though, Australians have been homebodies. They have not wanted to move, even Melbourne to Sydney to do educationally, whereas it's quite the different in, say, America, where people are intentionally sent out of state to do their uni courses so they can be mobile. So I think what's happening today, though, is in Western Australia, for example, where there is movement, because they've got such a labour shortage, there are almost ridiculous salaries being offered for the same job on the East Coast. So people are, even in some cases, we're finding people going over without a job because they believe they will get a better position in life going over there. And six-figure salaries for cleaners in the northwest of Western Australia.
That's not a skilled job.
No.
We're talking about skilled
That's
shortages,
right.
but I mean...
You add up all the costs, they fly in, fly out, the most, all sorts of jobs in that state now. So,
and in terms of incentives, does it all fall to employers in the private, say, in the private sector, or is there some role from the government? Well, you mean you're saying everyone's tapped already, but...
There has to be a collaboration, but I think the government has to involve the industry, the recruitment industry. You know, it needs that expertise. The government is very good at processing these people, but then the actual helping of them, the employing of these people is going to fall to firms like Aequalis, to Chandler McLeod's and the others. So I think that it's that collaborative approach that the government is going to have to take.
And also, let's not forget, you know, money is certainly important, but employees at the end of the day are looking for an employer that will add value to them. So yes, it's about the money, but it's also about stability, career progression, having a good work culture. So we see all the time that companies who get their employee value proposition right, they're the winners at the end of the day.
That's good to know. We always think it just becomes about money for all these jobs in WA, but you find that employers have to offer much broader than that.
Yeah, absolutely. We recently conducted research again, and we actually saw that in our case, Virgin Blue was the most appealing employer of choice for people that are out there job seeking. And it's not only because of the money, but particularly because of the stability, the good workplace culture, and the career progression development opportunities they offer.
Wow, let's just take a quick break away from this, guys. And again, I'll just mention Craig Emerson coming up and due to speak any time from Canberra. And we have to have a quick check of the markets as well, because what we've continued to see after the Australian dollar dropped initially after the jobs numbers, it looks like it's really hanging on to those lows. 106.07 US cents. I think this time yesterday we were talking about 108.5 or something, weren't we? Maybe that was 2 days ago. It moves quickly though. 106.06 just before the employment data. It was at 106.92. And actually we've seen the Australian share market remain quite weak after the employment numbers as well. Perhaps some technical analysts have even suggested this is the straw that breaks the camel's back for the S&P ASX 200. The 200-day moving average support is near 47.12. You can see we're below that at the moment. And the Australian dollar, as I mentioned, falling about 1%. Maybe that's a bit of relief for some of those stocks that are so sensitive to the exchange rate, but unless we actually continue to see perhaps significant falls, and as long as we continue to see that the Australian dollar at these kind of levels is hurting some of these corporate earnings, as we've seen from BlueScope today, perhaps there's fear of further offshore selling, and the global risk aversion that we've seen, of course, is still in place. So 47.07, we'll just keep a watch on that number, and remember the 200-day moving average support near 47.12, worth mentioning. And we'll just quickly whip through some of the blue chips to show you where